The format is set, 24 teams. It is 8 getting playoff spots, the other 16 playing in to see who joins those 8 teams. The Canucks are a play-in team, and we'll get to them in a second. But first off, Ian McIntyre, Satyr Shah joining me. Sat, I'll ask you this. Do you like the format that has been agreed upon?
Preferably, I would like to see it be smaller than 24 teams, whether it's going straight to the playoffs or having, say, 20, 22 teams max. I understand they're trying to get as many games in as possible for TV, and, there's money on the line, I understand. My only hesitation with having this many teams, isn't to watch more hockey. It's time is of the essence during a pandemic, and I just worry about adding too many games and too many teams, and you make this too long, and it makes it harder to get in. That's my only concern, but from a viewpoint of actually watching more hockey, I think hockey fans are not against that.
Ian?
I like it, Dan, almost as much as your new haircut. It looks like you were first in line when we started to reopen. I think the 24 teams is actually a good compromise. It made no sense to try to finish some kind of regular season schedule, because you can't bring back 6 teams who have no chance to make the playoffs and ask them to play 2 to 5 games to even out the games played. And I also don't think you could just go straight to 16 because it's too tight. I mean, look at the Canucks in their division. They're out on points. They're in on winning percentage. So I think it's a good compromise. The one thing that does bug me that I'm hearing some of the criticism of people saying, well, this isn't going to be a proper playoffs. The Stanley Cup winner could somehow have an asterisk against them. If anyone survives, or whoever does survive, a 5-round Stanley Cup tournament, they are going to be worthy champions. There's going to be an asterisk on this season, obviously, because there hasn't been one like this ever. I mean, it's been over 100 years since there was a pandemic that affected the world as this one is. So there's going to be an asterisk on the season no matter what. But with this tournament, if the NHL is able to pull it off, and that's a big if, but if they're able to pull it off, there's going to be a worthy champion at the end of it.
I'll have you know I cut this hair myself, so perhaps that's why it looks like it does.
I'm calling liar pants on fire.
No. Ian, I know you talked to Jim Benning not too long ago. Where are the Canucks right now in terms of their health? Who is available, who is not, if it was to start in 6 weeks?
Well, if it's to start in 6 weeks, they may have everybody available. Michael Ferland with his concussion issues and real serious questions about the future of his career, I think is maybe the only player who wouldn't be ready. If the playoffs started now, Josh Levo, who broke his kneecap back in December, still would not be ready. But 6 weeks from now, I think there's a good chance they'll have everybody. And that's exciting for the Canucks, especially when you think that Jacob Markstrom was injured down the stretch. Brock Besser had just come back from an injury when play was halted. So it's going to be good for them, but of course it's going to be good for everybody. There's going to be a lot of healthy players, a lot of healthy rosters.
Sad, how much of a boon is that for Travis Green if Levo again is available to him?
I think it's huge if Levo is available. I don't know what to expect from Ferland at this point. I mean, you hope for the best and you hope that he can be healthy enough to just live life and be able to play at some point. But Levo, if he's healthy to go for training camp, that's a massive addition because he's a play driving forward. You add him into the mix on the third line. And this whole notion of coming off an injury, well, yes, it's a problem, but he's not trying to catch up against players who've been playing for 2 or 3 months. Everybody's coming off a layoff. So you get a 3-week training camp in. Even guys like Besser that were coming back and guys like Markstrom, they have an even playing field now coming back from injury. That training camp aspect is going to give the team a chance to be completely fresh, and those guys don't have to feel like they're behind the play against your opposition. So for Travis Green, he gets the healthiest lineup he's had ever coaching this team, especially heading into this point in the season. Like Ian mentioned, every team has the same, advantage at this point, but especially in goal, that can be a huge one for the Canucks.
You look at who they're set to play, and you think Minnesota, well, man, they must be miles behind Vancouver. They had a terrible start. They fired their coach. They sold at the deadline. Jason Zucker's no longer there. And yet they're just 1 point back of Vancouver with the same amount of games played. So really, the series seems to be somewhat on even footing, Ian.
Yeah, but if you look at the teams, Murph, that the Canucks could have had to play, you'd rather Minnesota than Calgary, you'd rather Minnesota than Winnipeg, you'd rather Minnesota than Nashville. I think they're the opponent of choice. Now, you make a good point. They're only a point behind the Canucks. When things halted, they won 8 of their last 11 games. They seem to be rejuvenated by the coaching change. But they are a team in transition. From their perspective as well, they're probably looking at the Canucks and thinking, well, that's a pretty good matchup for them. All those inexperienced players, including a starting goalie who at age 30 has never played an NHL game. I think probably both teams are going to make the best of it and say this is a good matchup for them. Certainly for Vancouver, it's better than some of the alternatives.
So you look at them, their top line could be very dangerous. Preezy, I'm guessing Stahl, and Fiala, who is on fire. But really the strength of this team is the defense. That's what will give Vancouver the most trouble, no?
Oh, well, absolutely. Their top 4 is as good as any teams in the league. Ryan Suter might be in his 30s, but he's still playing almost half the game for that team. Look at Jonas Brodin's talented. Matt Dumba started getting good towards the end of the season. And obviously, Jared Spurgeon's been one of the most underrated defensemen for a long time in the National Hockey League. Their top 4 is almost as good as any in the league. It's really solid. So that's where their strength lies as a team. Goaltending-wise, pretty much league average goaltending from Stalock. Dubnyk had a really tough time playing this season. He really sank the team in that first half. But their advantage is in the defensive side of things. Their forward group is good. They got speed, they got talent, but they're just balanced up front. It's that defense that really carries that team. They're really good in transition as well. They're going to get rush chances against you with that speed and how quick that top 4 defense transitions the puck. So for the Canucks, they just have to really rely on the advantage they have in the top 6 forward group, which should be amongst the better ones in the Western Conference, especially when they're healthy, having Jacob Markstrom a goal and hoping that Quinn Hughes is that X factor on defense. Those are the advantages Vancouver has, because that top 4, that's going to be tough to match up against for the Minnesota Wild.
People forget, guys, how heated this rivalry was between the Canucks and Wild before the Chicago Blackhawks came along and changed everything as far as Canuck playoff history. All you need is Matt Cook in this series, and it'll be crackerjack.
Bertuzzi could say, don't bother buying tickets for Game 6. We won't be back, because there wouldn't be a Game 6 anyway. And he'd be correct this
and
time.
Nobody's going to have tickets.
Is Darby Henderson shooting shots from outside the blue line?
We'll find out. He's still part of the organization. I'll leave you guys with this. Ian, if they do play it and they come back and we get some sort of semblance of a play-in, what will that do for the young players on this Canucks team, like Pettersson, Hughes, Besser, even a guy like Horvat, who's only experienced it once in his career?
Well, and even Jacob Markstrom, who I already mentioned, not having played a playoff game. It's going to be incredibly beneficial. However long the Canucks are in this tournament, the fact that those young players especially get to see what it's like where as the coaches say, every inch of the ice counts, every shift counts and is at a higher level of intensity than what most of the players saw at any point during the regular season. That was the biggest threat to the Canucks, or the biggest loss to the Canucks through this pandemic, at least from a hockey standpoint, was that all the good that they did to put themselves in a position to make the playoffs was so these young cornerstone franchise players would at least get to see what that was like, so that a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, they'll be that much better. This is really important for those players to get some Stanley Cup experience, even if it's in July.
Okay, Sat, last question to you then. What about the position the Canucks are in now compared to last year, with the likes of Miller and Toffoli and, of course, Pearson, some of these guys who have played in the playoffs and seem like playoff-type players?
Well, I think the Canucks, when it comes to Minnesota, that's why I would pick them in a best of 5, winning in 5 games. I like that added experience those guys have on the team. And if you look at the way the Canucks are structured, and if those young guys, like Ian can kind of rise to that moment and really embrace it and be productive, you start adding in some of those players in the top 6, because the playoffs are all about, do you get enough saves? Do you have at least one defenseman that can really push the pace defensively for you, moving the puck forward and being a difference maker? And do you have a group of forwards that can get hot? And the Canucks have the makings of that, and you hope a guy like Miller and a guy like Pearson and Toffoli, who've been through it before, can really help those young players along, because the potential is there. I mean, nobody's picking the Canucks to win a Stanley Cup or anything, but, it's an even playing field, and you have this advantage, especially those veterans coming in, 2 or 3 guys get hot. I can see how they can sell themselves on perhaps doing something once they get in.
Well, guys, it was nice to finally talk hockey. I'll tell you that. Maybe next time we get together, we can probably talk about the ideal lineup and more like that. But thanks for joining me to talk this format and the Canucks' health and how they'd look if, and we hope it does get done safely, if they start playing again. So thanks for joining me.